Good to go. All right, the select board will call our meeting to order. It is Thursday, February 16th at 6 p.m. We are here with the joint, with the Dunstable Advisory Board, who I think need to call their meeting to order.
We do. I'll call the meeting of the Dunstable Advisory Board to order on the same date and time.
Excellent. For the select board, we don't have any public forum. We do have approval of minutes from February 9th, 2023.
I move to accept.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Again, it's just two of us tonight. So it's Leah and Kieran here for select board and our advisory board friends as well. That will quickly move us into our joint meeting to discuss the fiscal year 24 operating budget and an update from that vantage point. So how do you want me to kick into this, Jason?
Do you want me to go through an update?
Absolutely, that'd be great. Yeah.
Okay, great. So some of this, the advisory board, sorry, some of this the advisory board has already heard, so I'll breeze through some of it, but I just wanted for the select boards.
Yep, and for those
benefit.
that will be watching the recording, we do have a presentation that's going up on the wall that would be available at some point to
Sure.
the public? Okay,
Absolutely.
cool, yeah,
Yeah, we can post it on the website.
excellent.
So these are the revenue assumptions that we've made. We're taxing at the maximum allowable levy, 2.5 plus new growth. Local receipts have been level funded up to this point based on actual collections, not based on this year's budget. They're actually increased over this year's budget, but actual collections are level funded. Assumed a 2% increase in state aid. We've assumed the same use of the free cash amount, 479,343, as this year. That does leave a free cash balance of 161,138. So this is just a real quick breakdown of the levy limit. Prior year levy limit plus 2.5 plus an estimated new growth of $110,000, and the excluded debt number is up there too, $326,000, for a grand total of $11,388,306. Here's the other revenue we have coming in: state aid, local receipts, free cash, water enterprise. Community preservation is highlighted because that number's not finalized yet. That's actually the number from last year. And then the trash revolving fund has increased because the Board of Health has increased the fee. Thought they were going to increase it to $350. They actually increased it to $360. So the grand total of other revenue coming in $2,390,985.
Do we know, so that's a 20% increase in that trash rate for our residents. Do we have any background on what caused that? Is it just, that's more than inflation, because inflation was ballparked around 9%.
I mean, that's money that's coming in, though. The revenue's increasing, right?
No, but the cost for the service right now is $300 a year. It's going to
Right.
$360.
Oh, it is.
So is there an expectation that they'll lose any customers?
So their pricing is very competitive.
Yeah, it's a great price.
In the market.
Oh.
Yeah, it's
It's much lower than the market.
Yeah.
The contract price is increasing.
Okay.
They also have capital costs that they ask for in the budget, and instead of funding it through the budget, they're going to fund it through their revolving fund based on the fee. Mostly just the replacement of the toters that apparently are getting old and wearing out, and they replace those at no cost. So I think those are the two major drivers.
Okay.
And I think next fiscal is the last year of the contract, so there's also an anticipation of potential fee increase the following year.
Yeah. Though it'd be a savvy negotiation tactic to take that current rate and bring it out to the other service providers in town, see if they can match it or better it, because we're not obligated to the service provider. And with a built-in customer base, it's a real, model of efficiency to go that way. So, are they negotiating that rate, or is that? I know this came up during our fall town meeting. In terms of procurement, that would be falling into the TA's world, right?
So the proper procurement of it, although trash contracts are exempt from 30B, so you can create your own process for procuring the service. It does fall outside of the bounds for whatever reason, I don't know
Okay.
why. But to the extent they want support and assistance, I'd be more than happy to be involved in that.
Yeah. Yeah, you just may know some tricks that
Yeah.
they don't, and they may know some tricks we don't.
Yeah, yeah.
You, it's a matter of Maria.
Yeah, I met with them, I met with the Board of Health last Friday morning. And we had a really, I mean, it was a very good meeting.
Yeah.
I thought it was productive. We worked through the numbers of their budget and the fee increase that they were considering, and also the budget requests that they had. And I felt like the capital request they had could quite comfortably be covered through the revolving fund.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
I know you told me several times, local receipts.
So local receipts is here. It's largely motor vehicle excise. There are like permit fees and other things that contribute, but the vast majority of the 750 is motor vehicle excise. Yeah,
Are they late going out?
they are. Yeah, we're working with the registry. They should be out by the end of the month. So that's grand total revenue, 13,779,290. So here's some spending assumptions. The only thing that has changed since our last meeting is the health insurance increase. That 1.9% increase is from Maya. They called us with it. So we were assuming a 5% before, and that's good news. Finally!
I mean, that's pretty good
Yeah, no, it's very good.
in the world right now. 1.9% is not a lot.
Schools were looking at 15%.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
Which sort of gets to the point of like, if we're able to only have that moderate increase, the projection of 15% from the schools kind of throws it way off. Because I mean, that's a huge chunk of their increase as well,
It is.
healthcare costs. And if they're at 15, they sort of need to explain that
Yeah.
a little bit.
And we are still testing the market. I mean,
We're still testing the market. We're under 2%.
I have no idea. It is quite possible that we get better than that. It's not clear yet, but we are in the process of testing the market, so.
They need Kevin Pecos to negotiate for them.
That's who's
That's,
helping us.
yeah.
So everything else from last time stays the same, 2% salary increase, 1% increase in property casualty, that's gotta be confirmed. The retirement assessment is going down by 6.25%. That schedule is, that payment's based on the schedule. And, I should say, the expenditures, we're gonna go through some modifications of the expenditures coming up. So as you'll remember, last presentation, we had,
Can you go back to previous thing?
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
I remember there was a talk about salary increases last year,
Mhm.
and it had, because something had gotten missed.
Correct.
Is
It's
this,
one step.
is it all set now?
Yes.
And
that was all
Yeah.
taken.
we're not gonna have to see another one?
No, I think it's been
It's-
corrected, and the step has been corrected through, we used ARPA money, I
Yeah,
think,
we used ARPA
to
money.
make up for the difference that they didn't get, but now it should be
Okay,
It should be pre-programmed,
squared away
essentially.
into the whole
Built in.
schedule.
Yeah.
okay.
Good
Sorry.
question though, because that was a tricky one, and we were like, it was missed, COVID,
Yeah.
wild times.
Yeah.
Okay, so the last presentation showed about a $1.07 million gap. So I've gone through an initial set of conversations and resulting reductions in some of the requests that we've received. So these next two slides are a brief summary of those reductions. Now, I want to state too that some of these reductions are based on the assumption that we will fund some capital through ARPA. So when you see the cruiser cut out of the budget, that's making an assumption that that's going to be funded out of a different bucket, but still happen. Okay. So in my meeting with the Parks Commission, they felt comfortable with reducing the purchase services by $3,000. That was an increase requested based on my memory serves me right, based on wanting to get a separate irrigation contractor on board.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Based on the flexibility they have in this year's budget, there was some comfort level that they could handle it without this increase, so.
Okay.
Treasure collector asked for $10,000 for a tax title to help manage the tax title process, sorry. And so I have reduced that. I have calls out. I know there are some law firms that assist communities with the process. I'm trying to get a better sense on the arrangements that can be made with these firms. My recollection is actually some firms will front the effort with the idea that they'll get paid on the back end.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a friend in the business, so I have a couple calls out, one of them to him to see, to get a clearer picture of what that might look like. We may have to bring some of this request back, but for the time being, $10,000. The Cruiser 61 has been removed, like I said. I think we need that, and we hope to fund it through a different spending money bucket, I guess.
Green communities, perhaps.
Well, maybe that
Contribute
could
to-
supplement too, exactly.
Get him a
Absolutely.
Tesla.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
Okay, sweet.
The new Priuses are pretty nice now, apparently.
And then there was a request to bring up a sergeant position to lieutenant. This is bringing it back down to sergeant. Fire department had several increases requested. I went through these reductions with the chief. The PPE, I anticipate again being funded, just not through the budget. I hope.
That was a
I-
mandate, right? At least what the chief had explained was that there was a mandate to have.
They're, yeah, they're beyond the 10-year lifespan.
Mhm.
There are times when the equipment's not available in certain scenarios. There's no backup
Yeah.
PPE equipment. Harold, you know probably about this better than me, but there is. So this request would fund 5 sets. The idea would be just kind of having a reoccurring expenditure each year for additional 5 sets until we're caught up. You go on to the next slide.
On the Cruiser, they probably have a list of what vehicles they have and stuff, I guess.
Yep,
Do they, I think typically they get one each year,
yep.
so they've got their oldest vehicle is like 4 years old, is that kind of?
I'm not sure, but I do have the list I can share with you. We had a meeting with the capital planning committee this week, and we went over that with them, but I can share it with you.
The goal is they're always on a rolling,
Yeah.
so like they age out pretty quickly, and the runtime on them is nearly 24/7 because they're going shift to shift.
No, that's what we've been doing in the past.
Yeah, it's usually the strategy, and
And they're all owned, right? They're not, none of them are leased.
that I don't know. I think the chief's SUV might be leased because that's not like it doesn't have a Dunstable name on it per se, so I don't know if that's owned. But
Speaking of which.
I think they are all on. The chief is looking at a lease arrangement too, just so we have the numbers, so we can make an informed decision, but the outright purchase is that number, 61,000.
Oh, yeah, they were talking trading on this too. Yeah, there might be some trading value.
Yeah, I think it was 5,000, I wanna say.
How do you know about that?
Okay,
Like, when?
On my way here.
so the highway,
I could see it from.
highway asked for a large increase in their paving budget, so they've agreed to cut that back to level.
okay,
The roof at the salt shed needs to be replaced, that's the $25,000. That's another capital item that I hope to get funded in alternative funding mechanism. You'll remember that one, it has 1 more year of the warranty left.
Mhm.
And so if we do it next year, 50% of the cost will be covered under the warranty. If we don't, we'll have to cover the full freight, so it makes sense to do it next year.
Is this more free cash? That's what you're thinking, or, yeah?
I'm hoping ARPA, I'm hoping all this can fit in our
Have
ARPA.
to use it or
to make
lose it.
work.
This is the right thing, and the
Yeah.
the hurdles for using ARPA money have been greatly reduced because things have gotten back to more normal. And with some of the projects that we were shooting high on have come down low, which is great for the town, so.
Absolutely.
So the snow removal from this year, I'm assuming we're way below.
I don't
would
have the year to
think
date,
so,
but
yeah. Seems like
we
it.
must be.
I mean, knock on wood, it doesn't, I don't
Yeah.
screw
I think
myself
we're
with
projecting,
April.
based on the way it's seen expenditures to date,
Days of salt.
the outside expenditure was higher than what was anticipated. But I think the overall usage is probably gonna be less. So what we spent to date is, mostly outside plowing, which was outside resources, to be able to do that, which was more expensive than we had for our budget, but. we're
Because they're
not using
charging
it.
more
Yeah.
So
in gas and all that.
this, so the report I have in front of me is just through January 11th, so
Yeah.
it's not fully year to date. But the costs, the expenses are only at 17,000. So,
What is nice is you can bring some of that forward to the next year, right? Is that how that snow and ice
so
works?
snow and ice you can overspend,
Yeah,
and then you
okay.
can raise it the next year. That's one of the reasons why, and the other thing is, if you increase the budget, you can't reduce it.
Right.
So they asked for increase. Once you increase it, you can't go back.
Mhm.
So you'll see we
Well,
reduced
it's
it
just
back
1
to
year, right?
level fund.
You can't go back for 1 year. I mean, 2, 3 years out, you could.
No.
Yeah.
No. Unless, you can't, let me rephrase that. You can reduce it, but if you reduce it and go over, you gotta figure it out, you can't
Yeah.
carry it.
Yeah.
That's the, sorry, yeah.
Sorry, on the highway roof, is there an actual quote?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
that's all.
Yep.
On occasion, well, recent, okay, that may be that
We
one
got
too.
bitten on the library,
Yes,
and we did that quickly enough, and we went back.
Yeah.
That's what we have.
There is a recent quote, and that 25 is based on 50% of it. Yeah.
okay, so.
Yeah. The transfer station, we were talking about the fee, the trash fee, that's just a reduction based on the trash fee going up.
Okay.
That 5,000 was for the toters.
Mm-hmm.
COA has additional grant funding that we are able to carry over, so that's covering salary costs.
Mm-hmm.
And IT, 5,000 out of cybersecurity, which was a new request. The idea being we're, again, including that ask in our, actually, hopefully a little more than that. All right, this is when the fun begins. So this is the school department budget, the next few slides. And so I wanted to just go through the scenarios that we have currently with regard to the schools. So the original request was an 11.5% increase. The total was almost $8.5 million. We received, as you all know, a modified request on the 8th, that was last week. Reduction of 220,680, an 8.5% increase. Now, the school's business manager last week, or maybe this week, no, this week, I don't know, last week or this week, time flies when you're having fun, sent me the Dunstable assessment number if the schools were funded at the level Groton budgeted for, which would essentially amount to a $2.5 million reduction in what they originally asked. So I ran, so it essentially would be a 4% increase on the Dunstable side, which that's what Groton originally budgeted right in that range, which is, you know better than me, like the typical increase that we normally see.
That's what they presented to us previously, when we asked for the
For the
five-year,
forecast,
five-year forecast, they said a 4% increase, which is what we're anticipating.
And what did they approve last night?
I did not review that.
Nothing.
Nothing. Last night was more of a,
It was, it was an informational
yeah,
Okay.
meeting.
chatting about kindergarten
But they
and
still
pricing.
need to certify a budget.
Yeah, I thought that was what their, I thought
thought
that
it
was
was-
their hearing last night. I thought that's what
Last
they
night.
wanted.
No, it was just a public, as far as I know, it was just a public hearing, and then, of course, people got up again about the full-day kindergarten.
Yeah, yeah. I tried to watch that.
Blows my mind. And we spent, both Dunstable and Groton spent, 2.5 hours expressing our concern with the budget, and then followed with the chair requesting $365,000 in increases for full-day full-day kindergarten, sorry. Not daycare. Full-day kindergarten. So it was kind of shocking, I would say, to have an end to that discussion of actually both parties that were there sort of representing the fact that we weren't looking forward to increases that would cause overrides in both of our towns.
Yeah.
And
Not
then
the year
to
for it.
close it out.
Recall, the chair asked for that,
Yes.
and no one supported it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's an issue under discussion, but it doesn't look like it's got no support. So, from the board level.
It has support, but just not this year.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, he might be looking for reprioritization, maybe not necessarily more money, but reprioritize a little bit for full day.
Yeah, I think they're seeing enrollment tail off in certain grade levels, so that will likely result in a shift in terms of where staffing is going.
One of the biggest things
But
I saw.
high school,
Is, big
but high school is,
High school.
high school's down.
yeah.
One of the biggest things, so one of the questions I had, and towards the end of our conversation, was regarding the number of staff that the district maintains. And one of the things that they mentioned was their market basket, that they were on the lowest or one of the lowest of the low. Based upon my research of just going to each one of these market basket websites, that was a complete fallacy. We were actually the highest by most of that market basket. Some we were within 1 or 2, but on average we had at least 5 more administrators than our market basket. So that was represented as that we were on the lower end, and we're not.
Well, they're using percent of budget or something like that, not the number of people.
Oh, number of people or number of salaries, and
Yeah, and,
it just,
I don't have enough information.
but I mean, let's just say this, I guess, from that perspective, I know just because it was the last one I checked was Westford. Westford has a $66 million budget, and they have 32 administrators. Our budget is less than that, we have 37 administrators. So if it's I don't know, cost per student maybe, or we could get down to that level, I don't know, but still, when they have less and a higher budget, it's sort of,
There are some complexities of being a regional.
I don't know, waiting for
There are
questions.
positions that you don't need in a municipal school district that you do need in regional school districts. You have to weigh that in too.
Excuse me, could,
I'm gonna hold on questions until we finish the
I
presentation.
want to know what a market basket is, okay? And I'm sure
It's-
people
it's common,
listening
it's
at home
common.
would like to,
So
to know that.
what it is basically what it takes is they try to look at comparable sizes of school districts, number of students, and and they look at expenditure per student.
Yeah,
And they grab schools that fall in that same sort of range, and they pull it together, and they call it a market basket for some strange
Thank
reason.
you.
It's not a
Yeah, it's not the grocery store.
it's really unfortunate use of term.
It is, yeah.
In this area.
Yeah.
to demol us.
Yeah.
This is encouraging, though.
Yeah, it is.
So I'll let you jump back in, Jason,
We
just
take
to
that.
keep, because I know we have to be savvy to our agenda and timing tonight, so.
So this just outlines the budget shortfalls based on the scenarios that ran. So, based on the 2.8 number plus reductions on the town side, that's the number 539,771. If it's only 4% plus our reductions, 167,990. I called this the midpoint, but what I essentially did was I took the low number and the 2.8 number, and I went and I just cut it right in the middle. Just to see, hey, maybe, if we're looking for a compromise position, somebody might take at some point, maybe this is it. So it's simply right between the two.
But not in here is the capital.
Not here, we have no capital included in this month.
Yeah, because the capital I know was
But I thought, didn't the previous slide show a level of 181? Or was it
188,
188?
something else.
Which was last year's number,
Right.
plus or minus.
Yeah, so I don't, because they haven't really declared the capital yet, or what's?
Oh, no, the schools have their, I'm sorry, I thought you meant the town.
No.
Schools gave us their capital number, it's essentially level,
Okay.
it's about 188, sorry.
The previous slide, it was on.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
these shortfalls don't have the capital as a part of them, obviously, right? It's still outside that, like, what we had, the money we had to come up with?
No,
It's
this is included. The school capital is included in these numbers.
And this shortfall here is what Dunstable's shortfall will be, not the school budget shortfall.
Correct.
Dunstable's number,
Dunstable's shortfall.
correct.
So, and
So
you
you'll
could,
see on this slide, Karen, the
Yeah,
capital, those are all, the 188,281, that's their capital number.
and it's the same in each,
So that's
And it did
that's
not-
our portion of the capital number.
That's correct.
yeah.
At this point in time.
Have they provided a list of what those capital requests are?
They have,
it's mostly the leases, which really shouldn't be a
Yeah.
capital item. I think we talked about that last
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
What, the computer lease?
Yeah, it's not a capital item, but
Yeah, it can.
They consider it a
it's
capital,
It's a year-over-year occurrence.
but they consider it a capital lease.
Yeah, it's an accepted accounting principles.
I agree
And
with you,
depend-
but I don't.
Yeah, depending on the CFO at the hospital I work at, it
This one.
varies. One guy says it's not, the new guy says it is.
Whoever the budgeteer is.
Yeah.
Okay, so then, in that sense, then the 4% number at 168, we would be in a pretty decent position in that path, in theory.
I would
It's
think,
not-
But I'm not banking on that at all.
it's not great, but it's much better, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
but wouldn't it's manageable though?
I would
I
say
mean,
so.
anything,
say
I mean,
so.
you look at the 8%, it's not,
The 8%, yeah, it's tough.
Oh, that's a,
So at that number, we're relatively close. Will we be using all of free cash to fund
So,
operating?
well,
Which would leave us with like a $7,000
I'll get
shortfall.
there.
yeah.
I'll get there. So this is just basically what we just went through. And I know, I'm sorry, I'll get this to you, after the meeting, but, this basically just goes through the different scenarios and the deficits that result. So, on here is the original request, that's about 760,000. Again, that's with the town reductions incorporated. And
Sure.
You can move to the next slide. Thank you. So here's some other considerations. So, new requests that have not been cut that remain in the budget. The treasure collector asked for an assistant 10-hour clerk, that's still included. Highway asked for 10,000 to relocate the radio system to the water tower, and there's 58,000 and change for a new employee, still in the budgets. Also, another consideration is what Jake, you were just mentioning. We do have a balance of free cash, the 161, 138, that's still not being used. And then, like I said earlier, it does assume that ARPA funds will cover department capital requests. So if that doesn't happen, there are just simply some capital items that we're gonna need to fund. So it will bring that number higher on the budget side, or make the deficit worse on the budget side.
So with
Can
the
you go-
highway budget,
can you
the
go
highway
back?
person,
Yeah,
I know we had, I believe the request came last year, which we increased their staffing by one person last year to allow for, and we're supposed to mitigate some of our costs and allow for the work to proceed as what we were anticipating. The one additional employee was. And I think we need to look a little harder as to whether or not, or what the second additional person is going to be.
because they originally requested 2.
Right, but then
Last year.
when we pressured them last year, they came back and said, well, one will allow us to have that person that we
Okay.
need to supplement our, and when we get to a better budgetary time, we could talk about potentially expanding that again. But
Have they actually hired that third person? I don't think they have.
I don't know.
I don't know.
They interviewed,
Mike may.
they interviewed, but,
They interviewed, I don't think they actually hired anybody.
I can tell you.
Sure.
that rate, I'm surprised to see it at $58,000 a year. It's a relatively inexpensive construction worker.
Minimum wage.
I mean, I don't know if our budget year has gotten any better, so.
So we don't have,
So the clerk intern, is that what was canceled from the budget one year?
No.
No.
Didn't we cancel something one year and then they went and put it back at town meeting?
So the town clerk did request at the last town meeting, there was some questioning and requests and even a motion that I do not believe carried, where they requested for Carol to get to have an assistant for a period of
Either
time.
voting or.
Yeah.
Because it had been
Still
cut
was.
from the budget and
Correct.
then she was trying to, well, I thought it was
It was
successful.
like $3,000.
Yeah.
But it was the way it was presented by that department that made it
Choppy.
choppy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it
And-
wasn't
It
a
wasn't that way. Yeah.
proper request or something.
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree
Yeah.
with it getting cut. I just didn't
Yeah.
know if it's still in there now.
I don't believe it is.
No, because I think the town clerk currently has an assistant.
But this is the treasure collector.
this is-
Yeah,
It's not
this is
even
treasurer.
clerk
No,
has
but
to
it said
be-
clerk,
Yeah.
intern, okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
an intern, yeah.
I saw clerk and thought it was a part of
Oh,
that.
no, no.
No, it was the town clerk that had requested it, and it was rejected, and between, I think, both of our boards with the budget we presented forward in that town meeting, she stepped forward to request that be reinstated, and it volleyed back and forth for about
Yeah.
20 minutes. I don't think it passed though, but I'd have to go back and look at my
I don't think it did either, because there was still a line item within the budget
Yes.
that was gonna compensate the additional, the extra hours, or the
Yeah.
assistant town clerk hours. I think it's Lynn Denise was the one who was, at the time.
I think you're right.
I think it was around $3,000, but it was, Leah's right, there was a
Yeah,
way
if
that it
anyone
was,
wants to read it,
yeah, the way it was coming together was just a little broken up in that town meeting.
Yeah.
So I don't, yeah,
Yeah.
it is what it is.
Is the intent of the help for the treasurer to have more office hours or anything, or is it just pure treasury help?
good question. I don't even know if there's that much detail to it at this point, but ideally it would certainly, because there are a lot of times when residents come to the counter and are unable to pay their tax bills because the treasure collector is not in the office because she's only part-time. So if you could supplement the hours in that way so that, you know, there are more hours for people to come and pay, that would make the most sense for sure.
There are some rules and regulations in terms of who can receive a tax payment, things that are way outside my comprehension level in terms of being bonded, and then, you know, if I bring a check here, sometimes you may want a receipt, and only a certain person can give you a receipt, and if you stick it in the box down at the front door, you don't get a, you know, confirmation that you paid your thing sometimes, so there is some value in that role, but I think we probably, like Jason said, we probably need some more clarity in terms of what it's gonna entail and what it means to the town as a whole.
Especially given some of the situations that's going on with some of the taxes that aren't coming in.
And the increase of people are
Yeah,
getting upset about,
yeah.
rightly.
Okay, we can move through the next two pretty quickly. These are the original requests that we went through before, and then the next slide is just with the reductions in both town and school. I used the middle number for the schools, just
Yeah,
so we can move through the next one.
That service is good. That's good.
This is the revenue chart, which is an eye chart really, so good luck reading it.
She was asking for that.
This is
She
the,
was asking for the public.
I was just gonna say, this is the market basket that I put together for Dunstable, because I actually thought it was interesting, on the DLS website, just because of the heavy reliance on real estate taxes that Dunstable has in comparison to similar sized communities and with similar sized budgets, just the additional revenue that the town sees, it, generally speaking, is less than other similar communities. So these communities have between 3,250 and 3,750 people. and have budgets between 11 million and 14 million dollars. And so you can look at the data yourself, but it tells the story essentially that we have heavy reliance on real estate tax.
Are
So-
we flagging here though the ones that are
I did
members
not.
of regional school districts, because makes a big difference.
It does. I haven't gone through that work, but we did talk about it at the last meeting, and you're right. The fact that your regional school district versus municipal school district is certainly going to affect the state aid that you receive through Chapter 70.
Plus, I remember the percentage that a few of these towns were putting towards their school was a lot less than what we were doing, right?
Yeah, one of the columns is
Just relatively speaking, you're talking mostly western communities of Massachusetts.
Just massive.
Yeah, Princeton, I think, is the closest one. So it's just for it's Brimfield, Brookfield, Cheshire, Hatfield, Princeton, Sheffield, and Sunderland, which,
Oh, wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Sounds like a law firm.
so it's, I mean,
It's good, it's really interesting, it's good to, one thing that we're gonna struggle with here, or what's the right way to say it? We have businesses in adjacent towns that are already kind of established, so it will be kind of hard, or it's hard for businesses to thrive in Dunstable because you can go to South Nashua, Westford, Four Corners, or that's gone, to get, grocery store or restaurant. It's interesting.
We
But
did a
that's
market study a couple of
that's
years
one of
ago
the
too, that
reasons we-
basically gave us that result. It's like,
We will have a hard time attracting business. Yeah, that's part of the reason we're probably where we are with high
well, yeah,
real estate tax.
it sort of hammers down the reliance on real estate taxes, and then, relatively speaking, I say this with a broad brush, our school system, when you compare it to these communities mentioned here, is quite a high performer, relatively speaking. I just say that with all the appreciation in the world for how hard it is to manage the budget, but like, I know some of these communities, and we're light years ahead, to put it nicely, in terms of where some of those communities are at education-wise. And, I think we're pretty lean and we're pretty, efficient with the money we do have, so,
Yeah.
it's
I agree with
it's tricky.
You have to be.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of ways to compare Dunstable and our two-town regional school system to Princeton and places like that. Just doesn't really add up.
I have a question on, what is dictating the state aid to these towns?
So
I mean,
that's
ours
what-
is so low, and then others are like $1 million, almost
Yeah.
$2 million. What
Median income is gonna be.
is that what it's, that's what it's
That's
based on?
all it's
And it
based.
could,
Okay,
and we were talking too about, it could be the Chapter 70 money, that's the education money from the state. So
yeah,
if a community has a municipal school system, they're getting that directly. So that will,
Okay.
and that's all baked into the state aid number.
Yeah.
okay,
So it could be because of that.
that and median income.
Yeah, communities around us received 10 times what we got for,
Okay.
even the COVID money, the
Yeah.
ARPA funds, I mean,
We get nothing.
10x what we got.
Yeah,
So it's,
It goes into a different, goes direct to the school or something, rather than to the
yeah, yeah.
For us, it goes to the regional school
Schools
district, so we don't
Doesn't
see
show
it
We don't,
in our
yeah.
state aid, right? And it's not just Chapter 70, there's other funds that go there too. There's,
Yeah,
like the circuit breaker, sped reimbursements. I don't know
Again,
if
all
it goes
school
into the
stuff,
state
yeah,
aid, but and that's, can be a big number too.
yeah.
So these are the unresolved issues. Obviously, to state the obvious, the big one is the school budget. So, but there are other things that we're still waiting on. We expect to have a better idea of the state's budget early March. Finalizing the capital requests for consideration for the board, and the cemetery budget submittal. I don't have yet, but it's, that's not going to have a dramatic effect one way or the other. So.
We're going up 18% on our request,
Okay.
very high. That's a total of 4,000.
Okay.
The one thing
Come
I
on,
would,
guys. Jeez.
on the topics of like discussing the school budget, the one thing I did feel that it was much different, I think, or at least our voice may have been heard a little bit more, was with that when we were alongside our partners over in Groton. I know, at least I have felt in the past where some of the conversations we've had have been somewhat dismissive of our opinion, but when we're alongside the FinCom asking very similar questions from Groton and even some of the town administrators from their side, I think it was a little bit of a more fruitful discussion about how this needs to be managed, mitigated, as far as the increases.
Yeah.
I would think that potentially in the future, something we talked about was that maybe even having our FinComs together, advisory board and their FinCom meet with the school together so that we're not played off of one another, or potentially having both of our governments, in totality coming together to have the discussion with regard to what they want for their increases. I know it's challenging to get that many people from that large of a group together.
We actually did that about 5 years ago,
Really?
6 years ago.
Okay.
We had both FinComs, both select boards and the school committee in one big joint. You remember that? And we thought we made some headway, and we're back in the same place again.
I think at least I felt that it was really, I felt it was a different discussion, just personally, from
Power in numbers.
the way we had before. It was, generally speaking, they're not very often on their heels, or at least they're very, accepting of, negativity when it comes to the budget, because.
Well, and there's nothing lost in translation. Everybody's there,
Oh, right,
and you don't have to go through a series of emails in order to try to get an answer. And,
Yeah.
I think it does make sense to do that. Just,
Do you know, you talk about this ARPA money. Do we know what's available, what it can be used for? Maybe it's a basic question,
There's broad discretion on what ARPA money can be used for at this point. Initially, it was pretty restrictive, but the state has essentially said you can use it for just about anything
so it's,
you need.
They don't want it back.
it's coming through the state.
Because it just goes into the Baker
Yeah.
buck theory.
That they'd have to give back to us again.
Yeah.
So I know initially at one point in time, I think potentially what Leo's talking about, we had to earmark all of the money. We had to take the money that we had available and earmark it for individual categories of work. Has that been
No,
dissolved, or is that still there?
that's still there.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping that the request can be to adjust it a little bit, because there has been, I think you were just saying, there's been savings in some areas, like we haven't expended as much as anticipated. In particular, the Route 113 project. So it's more of like a repurposing of existing money that was allocated for certain purposes, and adjusting it for other purposes.
Yeah.
So, and I want to say there's like 289-ish that's available for
And it expires at the end of this next fiscal year.
24. We spend it by the end of 24, so 26.
I think it has to be committed by 24, expended by 26.
That's 15.
Yes.
Okay, so
Guess should we ask for questions or what?
So
So
I have
next
a
steps,
question, which is, can we kind of go back through, what's the timing of next steps here? When do we expect final school district budgets? So.
I thought they were gonna, I honestly thought they were going to finalize their budget, and that's why this meeting was gonna be able to be a little,
As I recall, the superintendent said, we will be voting on a budget. It
Yeah.
wouldn't be when we were there last week,
right.
and they wouldn't commit to when the vote was gonna be.
I think it was early March is what I read in one of their presentations, because I think school's off next week for vacation, April,
Yeah.
February vacation,
Yeah,
and then we're in March. So I think it's the first meeting in March. I think strategically they wanted to see how last night's
Obviously,
meeting went.
right, yeah.
But wasn't it by a certain date they have to have a balanced, but regardless of what's going on, they have to have, they have to submit a balanced budget or something, right?
They have to pass a budget,
Yeah.
so we can get all these things moving. Because they'll send a budget, we accept it or we don't. If we don't, we go back and say, can't afford that, here's what we can afford, and negotiation.
That's what it was. It
They
can go
have to
down, but it
increase-
can't go up.
Right.
They
Yeah.
can go down, but they can't go up, exactly.
Yeah.
So they will ask for more than we're probably able to fund. But then, that's where the negotiating starts.
But 57% of their town budget goes to the school, right? Was that the number?
58
Was it
is, you're
58?
talking Groton?
For Groton, yeah.
58-42 is the ratio.
Okay.
For us, it's much higher.
I think the town of Groton has a specific schedule, and that's why they have to present a budget by much sooner than we do. But I imagine we'll know the first week of March, I think, fingers crossed, where the school's at. But obviously with some strategies and some different ways to look at the budget, we sort of have to come up with a plan one way or the other. So, if it's 8%, what do we do? If it's 6%, if it's 4%.
Yeah, and I guess the question is, do you want to wait until the schools take a vote on a number and then strategize on how to best move forward? Or do you want to run scenarios now on numbers that we have to see? We know generally speaking, we know what the gap is to close.
Yeah.
Do we want to show what the effect of that would be, I guess? Or do you want to wait until we get the school number and then strategize?
I think we have to wait because we don't know what the number's gonna be. They already had heard feedback from town boards that what they're asking for, even 8%, is more than the towns can bear. So, we put on notice that they need to think about reducing, and then they've got their other things that they want to try to do that aren't even in the budget yet, like the full day kindergarten. So they've got to decide where they want to start. And, then we come back and say, okay, let's select. The good news is they did present, another, schedule of potential reductions in their budget that they could take if they had to, if there wasn't sufficient funding. So they've done some thinking ahead and at least showed us a path where they do have a way to reduce that out.
Yeah.
Whether that's what they finally do or not.
My only question is based on these scenarios, override discussion, right? So if they look at 4%, can we take override off the table and figure it out within the budget of our town?
Yeah.
Or are we looking at, no matter what they do, we're gonna have to be looking at override? I think that's kind of the scenario that I wanna know.
It's really a policy decision on how low you're comfortable with your free cash being.
It would be like $30,
Would I recommend spending every single cent of free cash to balance the budget? I certainly wouldn't.
I believe last year
I
we
think
went
we're
down to
spending
60
too
grand.
much now, honestly, so.
Ballpark,
you
yeah.
know. But
And it-
could theoretically, if it was 4%, between additional reductions and free cash, could you close that gap? You could, but you completely wipe out any free cash you have.
That'd mean we'd be telling our departments there's no flex here. Even though you asked for a XYZ, you're not getting it because it's all going towards.
So
It's a very short town meeting because there'll be no articles to vote on.
Yeah.
But I guess from a strategy standpoint, I don't want to be going for nickels. If we're gonna do an override, we need to do an override, and not have to do like 50 cents. And I'm not saying it's gonna be 50 cents, but I'm just saying, I don't want to be coming back every year because we need an override. I want to know what the plan will be going forward. If the schools come back at 4%, what are we comfortable with doing as a town, knowing what's down the road with Swallow Union, what's down the road with the fire department that's going to fall down if people aren't holding it up when it happens. And I kind of feel like that even separate from what the school's doing, I want to know what impact all of that's going to have on our budget going forward. And like, what's the number that's gonna help us get through the next 5 years?
We can't really do an override for future
Well, I-
planning, can we?
I-
It's like,
no,
you can't say, okay, we're gonna add another 150,000
Technically, I
to
guess
put it in our rainy day fund.
we could project out and utilize the projections that we receive from the school and from, obviously, we have, I think, for the last 3 to 4 years here, just skated by, and that number at the bottom line has just gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. I did not think it was gonna be possible, personally myself, that we were gonna make it this year. And I have a feeling, just based upon what we're talking about here, we're gonna get potentially below the 60,000 that we had last year. We could utilize projections from the school, from each one of our department heads within those boards, and project out 5 years and see what that number would look like. My guess is it's more than likely, if we were to project 5 years, you're probably talking the $2 to $3 million override. I think if you project 3 years, you're probably half of that, somewhere in plus or minus $1.5 million, somewhere in that neighborhood. We ran the numbers last year. Obviously, home values change and all those different things. I think it was looking at around $800 a home for $1 million. So, run the number, 800 times 3, could be, we could, if we went for a 5-year projection, we could push ourselves out into that neighborhood of, $2,000 to $3,000 in additional taxes if we were to pursue an override for a 5-year. And then hopefully, at least the goal of that override would be to not have to come back and talk about any of this for 5 years and not have to worry about budgetary cuts and each one of these things, that if we project it appropriately. And I believe we've gotten some, for whatever, we've gotten some some more competent folks within some of the leaders of our town that are producing budgets for us that I think give us a little bit more of some solid information that we may be able to build that sort of budget off of. It's just whether or not, which we always go back to, is there a taste or a flavor for, does anybody want to proceed forward with that type of override? Do we go for the 3 years at $1.5 million and you talk about $1,000 a house? Do you project out 5 years and hope to not have to come back? I mean, nobody, and I can tell you, I did not expect the school budget to double. 8% is what we're talking about now. Never mind triple with what they were asking for in that increase year over year. And I don't know what they're going to come back with next year. And it's concerning for sure to see that they're even still maintaining double what their projection was from last year, double the increase.
Sorry.
I mean, we're always gonna be in the red unless it's 2.5. Always.
Yeah, I mean,
We're
and
always.
living in a small town, we all know that. We all know that for us to, because we don't have any businesses, it's a small community, and I understand that overrides are what our life is going to be like. But I'm proud of this group here that the last, 3-4 years, we haven't had to have one. So I know that we're on the verge of needing one. But that's a huge improvement compared to when I first moved here and they were looking for one like every other year. So I want to keep that momentum alive.
I agree.
And let people know that we're looking for this for the following reasons, and that will get us through whatever we think it will work for.
Before COVID, we were walking down the road.
We were right there.
We were there.
We were walking down the
We
road,
were
looking
there.
at an override, and then there was no appetite for it.
Right.
There was so much uncertainty that, this isn't the year to do it. And every year it's the same thing. We're using $300,000-$400,000 of free cash to fund the budget, and we got to get away. We've heard that time and time again. We got to get away from using the free cash to fund the budget. And the only way you're going to do that is to do an override.
You started by asking how much money the override should be, and that's the first step.
Yeah.
Free cash, not in the operating budget. That's really should be used for capital and
Right.
stuff. So there's like $500,000 there.
But what do we, so I'm just confused on the mechanics and I probably don't need to, but we asked for that and did the money get set aside? Is it put into, how is it?
So the free cash is funding operating right now?
No, I get that, but
Yeah.
if we do an override for a certain amount,
That would be
is
to
there,
fund our
you're,
operating.
You could put some of it into stabilization.
Well, that's
You
what
need
I'm
a town
asking
meeting
is-
to pull it out.
we were able to fund, but we're asking more than the $26,000 that we need, that extra money, where is that going? Where is it
On
sitting?
my
in-
checking
It would-
account.
Is it your checking account? Okay.
For the count, the Cayman Islands.
Where does it sit, I guess is
So
my
it would,
question.
it would essentially go to the free cash, which would be available for articles
For
that,
the-
you know, that,
So it default into free cash for the next year then?
for this,
You could do a lot of things with it, I guess is the answer.
Stabilization is
It's
as
a-
simple as,
You could have, you know,
Okay.
a lot of communities have, like a capital fund, a CIP fund where they bake in money, they budget money every year to fund capital. You can keep it in free cash if you want flexibility. You can put it in stabilization, so you have it as a rainy day.
Okay,
Um,
so there are options.
You
Yeah.
could, do a whole lot of other things with it,
And
based on needs.
And there are certain benefits to doing certain things with it.
Yeah.
I would presume, it's.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
From a financial footing, it helps us to have that in a stabilization fund because it just, we're able to handle a crisis if
Yeah.
it came to that, especially the fire department falling down.
well, the catch there is you need a town meeting vote in order to pull it out.
Oh,
Yeah.
And if the town doesn't support you getting a new fire station, let's say,
Well, you need a 2/3 vote versus a simple majority to
Yeah,
use as free cash.
tough
yeah,
to do.
so that gets really,
Another thing that's barreling down the road here is this PFAS problem at the high school.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's gonna be
Yep.
megabucks.
Yeah, and I'm sure Jason and Harold know, but depending on what you put it in, it takes a town vote to get it back out if you
Mhm.
want to use it.
Yeah.
Whereas free cash is pretty liquid, but it's always not the best place to keep it either.
so then in thinking of doing an override, do you want the schools to sell it? Do you want the select board to sell it? How do you want to get it passed?
Well, so.
Because that's the challenging
Yeah,
part.
the thing is, Dunstable's has always supported the schools, it seems like.
Well, last year would say no to that because it
Well-
took us 2 votes that were really close in order to get that 190K, which
Yeah,
was
but
a
from a-
silly
from
vote.
an-
which is the reason why I don't know that a school override is realistically going to pass. I don't know that,
I don't think Groton will pass.
I don't think any override will pass.
yeah, and especially, and Groton doesn't have it from the other board that I serve on, that, going back to them a couple times for the Florence Roche,
Yeah.
has not exactly, because they look at that as school, even though it's two different bundles and two different things, that they
Yeah.
look at the school as school. And-
Yeah, and they've already paid twice now for an
Yes.
override.
Yeah.
So, I don't see Groton actually passing an override right now, is what, from that perspective. I feel like from a perspective of Dunstable, since I've lived here anyway, when they've done an override for the schools, it's passed. With the exception, and 1 year it didn't pass at Groton, so we ended up not needing the override. So to answer your question, that's my thought right there, is that from a funding standpoint, it helps when it's a school-related increase.
If we were to go down that route, I think it would be a municipal. I think it's just that we have not been able to fund any of the things that the town normally does, right, with our free cash. It's free cash that we've paid as taxpayers, and it's available to us. We go back to the capital improvements, projects that, the articles that we used to vote upon at our town meetings that have gotten shorter and shorter and shorter based upon,
Yeah.
the fact that we don't have any free cash because we're using it to fund operating. So,
And it may be semantics, but I'm along your thinking too. Is that I don't like it always being an override for the school. The school is a line item in our budget,
Correct.
and we have other things, and we're like level funding stuff, other departments that are in need to feed the school.
correct.
It sends a bad message to the rest of our town, I think. We gotta take care of our people and our municipality, and it's not always to the school. So if we're looking for an override, it should be to cover the need of the budget in whole, not just the school. That's, and it's semantics, because it's money coming in that gets spent,
Yeah.
but you know what I mean?
Yeah, money
It's-
and the money,
yeah.
yeah, that's all, I agree. But I agree with what you're saying, yeah.
It's,
It's semantics, but it's very important that
Yeah.
it's viewed as funding the needs of the town rather than needs
Right,
of the
it's
school.
just the school, yeah.
but if we had an extra $750,000, what would we spend it on? We can't even spend the ARPA money.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I don't wanna
yes,
tax
we
our,
can.
I mean, but like, I don't wanna tax our residents for the sake of like,
Yeah.
without a legitimate plan in front of us.
That's what I
That's
mean.
for you, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, but we need the plan before we can ask
Yeah.
them to pay more taxes.
I mean, it is
Yeah,
true.
and
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, no, sorry, I was just gonna say, I think part of the forecast he was talking about was a forecast for all parts of the budget.
Yeah.
Yeah,
3 to 5 year forecast for everything.
But it talks about that, you have the police, you have the fire was looking for a vehicle, police was looking for another vehicle. You know, we have other sort of roads, which is, we never, it's almost like, oh yeah, they come in with a budget that's too high and we always level fund them and just move on. Well, that's because we don't, I mean, roads are one of the most expensive things we can do aside from, you know, a new fire truck or a new this or that, you know. Roads are extremely expensive. So we immediately look towards, you know, that as an area to move back on that I know a lot of residents would appreciate a slightly more paved road or more well-maintained, you know.
I also remember the last time we did an override and it with, you know, it passed. I know it wasn't just for the schools, which was, I think, a big piece of it, because it was advertised as, if we don't pass this, the following things are not gonna, the library's gonna close on
We had an
Saturdays.
austere budget.
It was
Yeah.
it was very clear to everybody what we were voting for.
Right.
And if you didn't pass it, the following things were gonna be cut immediately.
Yeah.
And it was, and I thought it was a great move on whoever decided that, to go that way, because it was very clear on what was needed to fund, you know, and if you didn't pass, this is the following things are gonna happen.
Yeah, we were in trouble that year.
I'm setting a list of my takeaways, I guess. We put it over another year.
I mean, ideally, as part of the budget process, you'd have a forecast, what you're looking at, 5 or 10, even 10 years out, to say, okay, this is how we're trending, this is what the future looks like. You'd have a capital, you know, a real capital plan in front of you, so you could see, you know, so not only just forecasting capital needs within the forecast, but also see what that means tangibly within a capital plan. And then you have the budget, which ideally is more than a group of spreadsheets, but also like a real description of what we're doing and how we're doing it and why we need the money and what we intend to accomplish with the money. And so I hope that's the direction we're moving towards. And honestly, we should have policies in place that say, we're not gonna spend free cash under this amount. And we're gonna put X amount in stabilization and OPEB, and we don't have OPEB, but those type of funds, capital funds, so that, you know, in one of the communities I used to work in, there was a free cash distribution policy that every year free cash was certified. 10% went here, 10% went there, 10% went here. So you knew stabilization was getting funded every year. You knew capital was getting funded every year so at least there was some, even if it wasn't huge, there was some reoccurring funding of those items that really should be happening ultimately, if we can get to that point.
Mhm.
But, you know, on my list is, you know, a forecasting model that we can use every year, a capital plan that demonstrates 3 to 5 years out what we expect to need, and ideally we'd have the advisory board and the select board adopt financial policies moving forward, so that we have a framework, we have belts and suspenders on, okay, this is how our finance is gonna look, and we're not gonna, you know, there's no discretion in some of these items. This is how we run our finances, period, in the story, so.
I think that'd be super helpful, and thank you on such a short tenure stepping in and picking this budget up and figuring it out and helping us with it.
Do you know when you will get, like, state aid assessment?
So the new governor's budget is supposed to come out in early March, so we'll have it when the budget's out, or soon thereafter.
So I guess.
And we have new reps, so I assume you're reaching out to her now that she's been finally sworn in.
we've actually tried to, I think she's gonna come to a future meeting with the board
I think
too.
she's planning, she was supposed to come last week,
Yeah.
but she had strep, she wasn't able to come. And I think she's, I'll just double check for have her on the agenda for the 25th, I think.
Yeah,
So-
25th.
So as our two boards sit here and we discuss this wonderful budget as how we want to proceed forward, I mean, I know we have a big chunk of that is whether or not what the school does. Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
But it does fall into exactly what you're saying. It shouldn't just be, well, the school takes this much of our money, how much do we have left?
Right,
Right.
right. It's how much
That
do
shouldn't
we
be how
have,
we budget.
what do we
Correct.
need, and what can we give the school?
Um,
The other way around,
Right,
Yeah, but like, what do we need, what do we want,
yeah,
yeah.
and, you know, what
Yeah.
can we do?
yeah.
But I guess a little bit of a agreed direction on how we proceed forward would be helpful so that we can, at least understanding at this point, maybe we thresholds, if it's 4%, we try to float one more year, or do we, do we ask for a minor override? If we go to 8%, I believe we're gonna be in a position where we're gonna require an override regardless, which is unfortunate. I know nobody wants to hear that. But then, do we cap it at that amount? Or do we take that opportunity if we're going to the town, and as it's not just a school, and know that we look for some of our municipal needs as well at that same point in time? And if our two boards would agree that that's the best way to proceed forward, we will obviously listen to the voice of our townspeople of how much we're booed at town meeting. But
because you still have to present two budgets, one that's not
Correct.
override and one that is.
Correct.
So,
And that would lead to the list that you're discussing, which I believe would be our PowerPoint presentation or our billboards that are up there. If we don't go with the override, this is the town government you'll have, and if you don't, this is what, this is what we'll be losing out on.
Yeah.
I think, we definitely want to stay away from the override portion. It's largely, my, as I just turned it in today, my report for the annual report. Apologize for that being late, but as like you're saying in there, I felt like I didn't have to change it much because what are your accomplishments? Well, we didn't have to ask for an override, which is to a degree a good goal to have. But I think at 4%, maybe we float it for another year and then come together with a better plan for fiscal year 25, and we look towards what that means.
It'd be pretty robust in terms of what it covers, because you'd be out of ARPA money by that point.
Exactly.
I mean, do I know this?
Our parachute will be
coming in
gone
town?
at that point in time. We won't.
I mean, I guess that's kind of what I picture. I picture us, squeaking by one more year at 4%, if that's
Yeah.
the case, and then starting to work on what that means for everybody for next year, which is going to be a wake up year, and as it should be, because it's been quite a few years now since we've needed to do that, and as a group, I think we've done a good job of managing that.
Yeah.
And now next year will be the time to kind of, be a little more robust. If not, maybe Harold will open up an ice cream shop in his.
Should,
That's some,
yeah.
That's a
So
lot of
take,
calls.
takeaways are, we're gonna wait, essentially, we're gonna, we'll wait to hear from the schools, see where they end up number-wise. At the same time, maybe Jake's your chair, right, and I'm chair, maybe we connect with the TA to say, hey, what's 4% look like, 8% on the extreme, because I think ultimately, worst case scenario I was planning for in the event it's 8% and there isn't a successful override. So I think we have to be fully aware of what that looks like, because that's gonna suck. I mean, that's the only way to put it. And I think it's
But so
preparing for that.
the super town meeting though, that only would happen if one town passed, the other one didn't, right?
No.
It only would happen if Groton
Groton
passes
passes
it.
it.
Dunstable-
If Dunstable passes it and Groton doesn't,
There will be no.
you're not
super-
gonna
Okay,
see
then
a super
it
town
doesn't
meeting.
end up, but if we don't pass it and Groton does pass it, then it automatically goes to super town meeting?
Doesn't
No,
automatically.
We
No.
would get 2 tries, just like for the capital debt exclusion, they could say voted again. Which,
and the school
And if
could
it
come
doesn't.
back and cut, actually, and then they would just reduce
Yeah.
Groton's.
one thing that didn't
They
happen
could
was-
adjust the budget and
Yeah.
Which is what they had to do the year we passed it and they didn't.
Yep,
Correct,
exactly.
it's happened.
And with the capital debt exclusion, they had the opportunity to adjust it, but they chose not to. which drew the ire of some of our residents. Because they were still looking for like batting cages. Tough sell. But teach their own.
And then what year is Swallow Union ours?
The Union
In
Building?
April of the next spring.
But we own the Union Building as of,
We own it.
I mean, we already own it, sorry,
but It'll,
but it,
it'll
it
not be,
becomes-
not be leased to the school anymore.
for $1, right?
Yeah. Not if there's no.
That's what he's going over right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
There's gonna be a plan for that building.
yeah,
But
There's a plan for the building next to it is gonna be what realistically our long-term plan is. Just, again, watching the process of the Florence Roach, building and understanding what it's gonna take or what, you know, the MSBA is gonna come back with regard to, how we build and fund, our, you know, the Swallow Union School here in probably 7 to 10 years. You know, based upon the reports that they provided us 2 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, we've burned through a couple of that.
We're
10,
5 years in.
You know, we're working towards the fact that, you know, we're gonna have a 50 to 75 in today's dollars, $1 million worth of school that we have to find funding for.
also a fire station.
Also a fire station.
Okay, so the state numbers in a couple weeks, hopefully. School district in a couple weeks. How close are we on capital requests to knowing, because cemeteries pretty much know that
Yeah.
already too.
Close.
Okay,
Close.
okay.
I was working on it today.
Awesome.
It's very, very close.
I would think that we could run some numbers, have a couple of maybe Skype meetings.
Yeah,
to just kind of run through that real quick, just to run through some scenarios with what we can present to either board and have some discussions. It might not be bad to come back and meet again a couple weeks after we've finalized a lot of those unknowns up on the board. I would look at potentially mid to late March as a spot that I think would probably be good to sit down and,
Yeah, we'll start to look at the timing of the warrants and things like that. With like
we do have to
public-
back in from that.
Yeah, back in from that, and then town elections and all that stuff. That's usually early-ish May. So
We
hopefully,
don't have a whole bunch of time, but yeah.
Yeah. we want to keep an eye on that.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good sort of philosophy that we can
Yep.
go forward with.
Okay.
I'm not kicking you guys out, but we have our affordable housing meeting where we have to make a decision on that presentation next.
I
So
like the one without the buzzer, without the.
you can sit in the crowd and join us.
Do we have one business item we need?
Yes,
to
we,
conduct?
if you guys don't mind, just,
Yeah.
we'd like to, I'd entertain a motion to approve our, February 8th meeting minutes, from our joint meeting with the Groton Dunstable Regional School, Board.
So moved.
Motion made and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
What about, was there a transfer?
We did have a transfer request, of $3,000 to fund towards the,
Vadar point
oh,
implementation.
Hey, you got that? All right. Okay, so I'll read it officially here, which is the amount requested is $3,000 to be transferred to the treasurer, professional and technical. The current budget, or current available funds within that is $10,600. This is part of the purchase of the, which actually I picked that up tonight here too, it's somewhere here. When we approved the software, there's a migration cost that is associated with that, where we have to fund both systems at the same time. This is to purchase the town history from Point to convert to the newly purchased software Vadar. This is a Point requirement for additional funds. Remaining taken from the account, the town, so it was a total of $6,000 of cost. $3,000 was coming from the town accountant, right?
The
Treasury,
budget.
sorry, yeah, the treasury budget. And, the remainder would be coming from, the reserve fund.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? No. So we'll just go with a vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? No one? Perfect.
There's also one other 7 minutes from February 1st. We haven't passed yet.
So I would entertain a motion to approve, meeting minutes from our meeting on, February 1st. Motion's made. There's a second? Second. Made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All right. Thank you very much. And then as far as our next meeting, I think we'll, I'll send out some discussions, but it looks to mid to late March, we'll have that discussion. We're gonna back those dates back in so that we're staying away from, there are points and times we have to make sure that all of, we meet deadlines associated with presenting our budget and presenting that to the folks. So we'll make sure we're at that point, and we'll have a meeting, and maybe another joint meeting at that point in time, or individual meetings, we'll see how that goes. But, all right, I would entertain a motion to close the advisory board meeting. So, made and seconded, all's in favor? Aye. And we're out of here.
Thank you, advisory board. You're welcome to join our affordable housing discussion if you want. And also go home.
I'm gonna choose the latter.
Set yourself free.
I need to return this back. Okay.
Thank you very much.
I don't know that we've met in person yet.
Just email Sue.
Jake, nice to meet you.
Is the affordable housing group calling a meeting to order? Yes. You are, okay. Do you guys want to join us up here? Do we have enough seats, I think, for you guys to participate?
Oh, that's right, you get to stay, bud.
Yeah, I do.
Enjoy.
Matt's locked in.
What are you doing giving up the padded chair, by the way?
1, 2, 3. All right, I think we're good.
I gotta grab it.
Yep.
Fire chief calling me back.
All right. We have a forum for the affordable housing committee. Call the meeting
I'm keeping
to
it
order.
together.
Well, it was,
Manure fire?
looks like they had a burn pile going,
Yeah.
and they may have had a permit to do it, but.
Is it all
when
right?
I was driving down Harding Street, I could just see this huge burn pile with flames actively coming out of it in the dark.
Put the
I think that, yeah, I called the police on the way to the meeting. Well, I couldn't get the chief, I couldn't get any fire department guys, so I called Chief Hoyle.
the small forest truck went over when I came in here,
Yeah,
and obviously the larger one.
yeah, burn pile.
I don't know if you heard it, I called our meeting to order.
For the select board, this is number 4 on our agenda, MUD housing project proposals. Discussion, review, and consideration. We may take a vote to be taken. There may be a vote on this. Before we get into discussion, I'm going to look to our TA, just if there's any guiding principles we should think of before we get into this. I don't want to surprise you with my question, but just to keep everyone on the same playing field here, probably have public questions at the end, if that's okay with everyone in the crowd, just so we let the boards discuss, and then we'll try to hear from our friends in the public.
I also want to let the affordable housing know that we are on camera and recorded.
Yep.
In case you didn't see it.
Maybe I shouldn't swear at them.
No, you
Feel
can,
free.
you can do what you want.
Just have to deal with the repercussions later, that's all.
I love swearing. It's my favorite thing. So.
Me too.
So what do you think, Jason?
So I did put together this sheet, and it's strictly based on what was in the RFP in terms of selection process and rule for award. So I just pulled out the information in the RFP and kind of gave you a bulleted list of steps that should be taken based on the RFP for the select board's process to select a preferred developer.
Okay.
Do we have that?
So
I think that's.
it's in the
Yeah,
it's in the
binder.
Yeah,
I think
you want me to run through it?
I've seen it a few times, but I will, just for the sake that everyone gets to hear it, that's okay, just so
Absolutely.
my friends in the public can hear it too.
Yep. So it first states, these first couple things have already been done, but I'll state the process just so everyone knows. So Affordable Housing Committee reviews, evaluates the proposal with town administrator. That's been done. The evaluation based on submission materials, interviews, references, and additional information. Then proposals may be rated by the select board using the criteria that you have in your binder was in the RFP. Each criteria should be assigned either highly advantageous, advantageous, or not advantageous, which the Affordable Housing Committee has already gone through and done as part of their process. Final scores for each proposal calculated as an aggregated score based on relative importance, which is in the chart. Following the tabulation of the combined scores, multiple developers may be selected for the next phase of evaluation with the select board, which includes an interview process led by the town's select board. It stipulates the interview should be conducted in public with other town boards, commissions, and staff invited. And it stipulates what the expectations are from the principals of each developer team. So once that happens and the board ranks the proposals, land development agreement may be awarded by the select board, but doesn't necessarily have to be awarded to the responsive and responsible developer whose proposal is deemed most advantageous. When making that consideration, you can consider price, the evaluation criteria, and the interview. And then once that's done, parties will negotiate the LDA and the lease, final forms approved by town council and the select board.
Cool.
That's just right out of the RFP, so.
And then I think we should probably look to our affordable housing group to sort of share their findings. I guess it's worth noting, I listened to the discussion, but as a select board member, I did not necessarily participate in the ranking. So I think this group did a nice job working with our consultant and also coming up with some of their own discussion points on evaluating these two projects before us. So,
All right.
to John.
So we met about 2 weeks ago to do our rating of the comparative evaluation criteria. And it was fairly close, but we did find one that best fit the needs of our town more than the other. And we were unanimous in our decision in moving forward with that company. We had three contractors initially submit RFPs. One we dropped because it was completely
Incomplete.
Turn the page, there was nothing there. So 2 went through the comparative evaluation criteria, and we did score them. One had, I think, a score of 42. The other had a score of 40. The one that had 42, MCO, is the one that we recommended. And just to compare the two of them, very high level, MCO has a total cost of $12 million for 44 units. Arch Communities had a total cost of $27 million for 59 units. Arch Communities had a $21 million wish list of grants and other public monies coming in to fund it. MCO had a wish list of 0. So very, very different. Arch Communities was about $460,000 per unit. MCO was $274,000 per unit. MCO 44 units, 11 of those would be affordable housing, as measured at 80% of AMI, the area median income level. Arch Communities with the 59 units had, I think,
50.
all but 4.
Yeah, 55.
55 at 60% or even down to 30% of AMI. So very different criteria levels there. But both of them qualified at 100% for our need for affordable housing as recognized by the state. So I think that's kind of a high level overview. I don't know if I missed anything.
For what it's worth, our goal as a town should be, 10% affordable housing? We have right around
111 units.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
this gets us a part of the way. Each proposal, one was 55 affordable housing units, but 59 total, and one was 44 with 11 that were affordable and 33 that were not, but all 44 count.
They all count.
So there still is a difference between the recommended goal, but this is certainly
A big step from 0.
Yeah, or we have one, I
We
guess,
have
one foundation
permitted-
somewhere.
One permitted
Yeah.
at this point.
Not to mention too, I just talked a lot of numbers there, the look of the places is very important to the town also.
Mhm.
Arch Communities, the one that we did not recommend, had a large apartment building type facility.
3 stories, I think it was.
3 stories for about half of their 59 units, and then the other ones were in quadplexes. MCO with the 44 units has 44 individual freestanding buildings that they call cottages, very small, 1,150 to 1,400 square feet, which I think more ideally matched what we feel is appropriate for the town as far as the look and the feel of the community that would be developed alongside the rest of Dunstable.
They also, I believe MCO was the one that didn't need any money from the town,
Right.
Correct.
while Arch said they would use the money, obviously.
Yes.
They counted it in their pro forma to begin
Yeah.
with. I would have a recommendation on that, though. We still have the money, and it can only be used for affordable housing. So I would think that in your negotiation, maybe you can offer that money to MCO if you're negotiating with them in return for maybe 2 60% units.
Or in lieu of reduction on water fees.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of things you
That's
can
something-
do with it, but that's, there's probably 12 things you can do
And
with
it could
it.
help with perhaps having some covered garage
Yeah,
opportunities for the residents too.
if it does go, though, there is a rule with CPC now where if you get more than $50,000 to a private organization, they have to sign a grant agreement so that the money will come back to us if there's any problem.
What about town administrator housing? Can you use the money for that?
We can use it for that, yes. As long as it's low income.
Get a little cottage right up the street.
Sounds great. Sign me up.
Can you just explain this number 1 to me, the
Sure.
25% at
I can
the
read it.
80 versus the...
This is on the Jen Golson response, right?
I think they
Yeah,
have
Is that the same? Okay.
Yeah,
Let's see.
so the MCO didn't get anything on that one.
No,
Right.
and that should not have happened, because that's what we
Okay.
put into the RFP originally was
Yeah.
80%,
Right,
and they came back with 80%.
And this is the one where we had that long discussion about 25% or not. And they came in with 11 units that
yeah,
which is 25% of the criteria, and the not advantageous score of 0 is 25%. If they had 26%, they then would have had an advantageous.
It's like a
rating
technicality.
instead.
Yeah, it's a.
It's like the
it's a-
electoral college.
So
like
yeah,
one
but
vote.
isn't the 80% AMI more affordable for people? Isn't that a better?
No, actually, the difference there between 80 and 60 and 30, which we've been talking about, is
Yeah.
80% of the AMI is for one person to have an income of somewhere around $62,000.
Okay,
60% of the AMI is about $45,000, and 30% is around 28.
okay, so
So it's just,
the lower the number.
the lower the number,
is the more
affordable
it
it is,
Right.
yes.
Okay, I was reading
So
backwards. Okay,
the Arch Communities was at 60% AMI, or 30%, meaning it was much more affordable
Okay.
for low income for all their units.
Okay.
Where MCO had 11 units at 80%,
okay,
and the other 33 are at regular income
regular,
levels.
right. I mean, 0 is kind of harsh, but,
Yeah.
By the
I
measure.
argued,
Yeah, Carol
Yeah.
argued.
I
She,
argued
she,
for it.
she did not agree with
I didn't agree with the way it was
the way it
done,
was done, yeah.
but I was only one and there's 6 members, so what are you gonna do?
Karen, I think we said we'd take questions at the end.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, if you just let us finish ours, and then we'll. I couldn't see you with your hand back there. Sorry. Yeah, it's sort of the wording of that criteria.
Ambiguous.
Yeah.
it is ambiguous.
But
I just found it plain confusing.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Well, that's ambiguous.
and MCO was here that night, and they felt a little kind of paraphrasing, but I think they were a little disheartened by that.
Yeah,
But it was in the letter of the words here, it was the correct
They did
step we took. And again, if they had done one more unit, made it 12 over, in
they would have been
44.
fine.
Right, it's semantics. And
But still, they came back with exactly what we asked them to come back with.
And they could still adjust those numbers, couldn't
Yeah,
they?
well, that's why I
Yeah,
say you could
can
offer them
negotiate that,
the
yeah.
CPA money and just say, okay, put
Right.
two 60% units in there and they'll be well over 25. I would
Yeah,
say.
yeah, okay.
That's a good point.
philosophically speaking, what would be really interesting to me is if we get lower into the AMI, like if it's one person's making $22,000, I don't know how you afford to live in general. I mean, based on our
Yeah.
housing production plan study, I can't understand how that's even possible.
No, and there's probably nobody in Dunstable who can because you have to have transportation.
Right, so
Exactly, yeah.
unless
And
you
that's
have
a
just
car, yeah.
a junk car. I mean,
So,
or
the
a moped.
30% level is not practical in Dunstable.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
have to have a car. You've
Yeah.
got to
Yeah.
put the car on the road, you've got to insure it, you've got to have
Yeah.
some way to get back and forth to work.
Or you'd have to be working at the post office and walking,
Yeah, walking there.
which is possible,
It's
but then
possible,
the post office
practical.
actually pays pretty well, so you wouldn't be in the AMI.
It's important to remember, though, that like a retired senior living off savings would be perhaps 30% AMI or lower because the savings they're living off do not count towards the income that they have for the purposes of affordable housing.
Depending on the timing of when they sold their house, based on the new rule.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah, so
They
that's
have
separate.
assets once they sell a house, yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but that new ruling is sort of, I've heard people share their concerns about that. What other steps should we be taking, Jason, here? Is there any other discussion from affordable housing, John?
I think we high level covered the key points, unless anyone else thinks of anything to
That's
add.
fine. You've given them the information they need to
Yeah.
start working on it.
One other point of clarity that I know some of the neighbors on the Parker side, as well as just each party in the presentation, there was some concern about the low point of that area and some studies that have to be done just in terms of water, 100-year floods, things like that. But I think in surveying and proper build-outs, those groups should be taking that step to make sure their slab homes are not floating away. We certainly as a town don't want to have our neighbors having homes floating away on town leased land in general.
And it's in the contractor's best interest to make sure it's done right the first time.
Yeah, especially because they're both RFPs had on-site management and snow removal and things like that. So I think that's an important part.
We also had that discussion about flooding from the very beginning.
Yeah.
For 10 years, we've been discussing that thing about
Well, there is
flooding.
definitely floodplain that comes into that area,
There's
but
yeah,
but
there
they're gonna
is.
have to-
It's there and it's marked, and
Yeah.
that's not, and it was marked on everybody's plan. However, it's a simple calculation to figure out how many actual gallons of water there are in Maspog by the depth and the size, and how many can be held in that valley.
Yeah.
Don't
Well,
ask me,
yeah.
I'm not a hydraulics engineer.
well, yeah, they will have to do that, some sort of
Yeah.
elevation study to figure out where the,
None of the units with MCO, with their cottage style, have cellars either. They're all slabs,
Right,
so we
yeah.
don't have to worry about
Yeah.
sump pumps or anything like that.
yeah.
Yeah. MCO was interested in a commercial aspect of the blue recycling box area for the sake of clarity in terms of Snell property, everyone
Snell.
calls it, but it's the blue recycling box area to me. Whereas Arch, I don't think was, they didn't really have any, they just had it as almost like a parking lot in their drawings.
Yeah,
I can't-
yeah.
But ballpark speaking there. So Arch, it didn't really have much thought there. MCO sort of had was it their proposal that talked about, 20% at least, profit margin back to the town or something to that,
Yep, Yep.
that range. So I thought that was nice to hear, and hopefully it's something
and he's still working on it, and he intends to keep on working on it.
yeah, I think that's attractive to the town because it is one of the few commercial pad sites we have in town. If it's a butcher shop, if it's a microbrew, I have no idea. If it's a bank, it could be a barber shop. I don't care. Let's make it something, and hopefully, it sounds like this group was interested in working with the town to see what would fit best, which I
And
thought was good.
MCO was very personable. They were attending all our meetings.
They attended every meeting.
Yes.
And they've done very similar projects, the same floor plans of this cottage style work in other towns around here.
Several different towns
Hudson,
around
I
here.
believe, I can't remember for sure.
They've done them in Foxborough
So
and,
it's-
and,
So it's tried and true, which is, I think, very important.
yeah, they've done one in Lunenburg, they've done one in Fitchburg.
The other contender, Arch, seemed to specialize in rehabbing old buildings, like old schools.
Yeah,
Very different type of.
they're not, yeah, they're not experienced.
We have one of those.
They're not so experienced with building new, but they rehab pretty good, so.
That could be a really nice house for the town administrator.
Really good.
It's a
Trying to
beautiful.
give him food.
Well, no, right? I'm just trying to get a town administrator to stick around for a while.
Are you okay with me asking folks in the audience questions? I'm gonna start with Leo and then move up to Powell. I wanna say, I keep saying names wrong. Pablo. Leo?
One comment, I guess, I'm kind of happy with the one you picked because they're like single structures.
Mhm.
The larger multi-unit ones, I always have some reservations about added needs from the town, additional fire and other protection when you get into multi-units and more than 2 stories or so. So I agree about that.
Elevators.
Yeah, elevators.
Infrastructure up front that we have to do, the road, the water, any of that stuff? Is
Yep.
that on the hook for this?
So in both projects, the developer would be responsible, because there's, I believe, town water at the post office?
Yeah, there's water down
So the
there.
water's been pulled into that area, so there must have been a stub, yeah, there, that they would pull down the rest of the way. The cost to do the road would be absorbed by both developers. They may seek a Mass Works grant, but I don't know the timing of that, that'd be up to them. Arch, I think, was looking to follow a public funding path, whereas MCO seemed to be following the self-private funding, which is remarkable because we asked for financial data and we found that they have
it.
the bankroll.
Yeah.
There was one question that I don't think any of us could answer that had come up, which was, it was talking about the hookup to the town water and whether or not the hookup would be one hookup at the street, or if it would be a hookup at every single home or every single unit.
I think it would be at every single home. It'd
Be one coming down and then just, I
I mean,
anticipated
because
one
I-
main pipe would loop through.
Yeah, because
and
I
stop.
anticipated that it would be at the street,
yeah.
at the street, and then they would be responsible for doing the piping or whatever it was, and that
Yeah.
they wouldn't have to pay for each hookup to the individual house. That's how I understood
Yeah,
it.
because they're putting the
One
pipe in.
large.
Yeah, because they're putting the piping
And
in.
it's all the utilities are gonna be underground, so they're gonna be,
But wouldn't you charge each tenant, like, so the ones that aren't affordable, you'd want that tenant to pay for their water?
But that's where, well,
Oh,
no,
you
would,
mean a
you
meter
would,
at each house?
well,
Yeah.
you know, 'cause it
individual house
wasn't,
or just
see, I didn't think it was just a meter. I thought there was I thought that
There's a hookup charge.
a hookup charge.
Betterment fee, basically.
Yeah.
Right, that's what it is.
And there was a question about whether or not the hookup charge was just at the street or if it was at each of the individual units. So that will come up in your discussion.
Yeah, that's where I think the
that's all.
CPA money would be, because
Yeah, that was
I want them to be
originally,
paying water users for the town.
Yes.
But that, like Carol said, the only thing we could use that money for is affordable housing. So if that's in lieu of ensuring that day one, the tenant is paying for their water, because I don't know how much water people use. Everyone showers differently and bathes differently.
Because the hookup was like, what, like $300 per hookup or something, I think?
well, it's more than that.
It was a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
Well, a lot more than that. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
more like
it's
$3,000.
Okay, maybe, yeah.
Which is a little ridiculous when you're talking about affordable housing.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, thanks. There's been some discussion about the different levels of 80%, 60%, and so, do the different levels have any benefit to the town's affordable housing stock, or is it just a single unit?
They all get counted.
affordable?
Yeah, they all get counted regardless, since
Yeah,
they're all
okay,
residential
so,
units.
I guess what I was trying to figure out there, is there any benefit to adding, a 30% unit, other than it's more affordable? Okay.
It sort of comes down to what's the goal of the project. I mean, stepping way back, you have 44 units and they all count towards the affordable housing count, and 59 in the other. 55 of those are actually affordable housing units, so the public benefit is higher there, speaking, compared, but they all count towards your affordable housing number. You know, if you take the 44 and only 11 are actually affordable housing, and then you have 33 other neighbors who could be driving, you know, 6-figure cars and paying, you know, market rate rent, which is actually quite high in Middlesex County. You know, should they just be buying a home? It's up, the developer has to have done their study to figure out what's going to be successful for them. For the town, it's a philosophical question in terms of what our goals are, and that's what the hard work of the Affordable Housing Committee.
It's meeting both.
Deliver.
It's meeting our 40B requirement, and it's providing affordable housing for, some affordable housing for people.
Well, actually, it's much more affordable than trying to buy a house in this
Oh,
town.
absolutely, yeah.
There's none for sale.
You can't buy a house in this town for the prices that he's charging on those, even on the market rate ones.
And one of the objectives of the committee was to find housing that would be suitable for people that are looking to downsize as they retire.
Mhm.
And, you know, the village concept, I think, for cottages might be an ideal opportunity.
And a lot of them are handicap accessible.
Right.
Universal buildings, so they can
Yeah, single
be
floor.
used for handicap, veterans, whatever.
And they're so cute.
And I'm not going to ask the questions, but some issues for consideration, really, really very important, I believe. So, by the way, I shared the New York Times article, I hope.
Yep, we sent it along. Yeah.
Right, about this. So, flood. I live on 61 Parkhurst, very close to that area, and with the kids, we spent a lot of hours in that space for over 30 years. It flooded 3 times. Right? Now, not because, well, somewhere rain, somewhere beaver dams, but that thing once, it was complete, it was like a lake. So that's a concern to me because it's like a ball, and the water can come in only one way and can exit only one way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what the law is. So there should be, I think there should be a very strong consideration given how to build that road. Build it up so the water can go in and out, so if it gets flooded, emergency vehicles can come in. That's a huge issue.
Mm-hmm.
Second one is traffic by the post office. Both proposals kind of gave lip service to that issue, but if we have 80 cars in that space and there are buses and there's traffic to the post office and there's no policeman the way it is in the center of the town, right, during the rush hour, that could be an interesting topic in that area. How does that affect me? But it gets pretty busy.
Yeah, there's almost, I think, 8,000 cars a day on 113.
Yeah, and
Drive
it's
17.
really, there was no consideration given to it except that somebody.
Yeah.
A lot more than 8
So
times.
that's
Rather
the
understand.
thing.
Yeah.
The last thing is to me very important. 51 Parkhurst Street, I'm sorry. That's a house that sits right on the top of the edge. And right behind that house, like literally right behind the edge, the slope goes down. So all the trees go down. And I walked through it today, especially before this meeting. These people will be looking at those roofs. There's no way that this will be major effect on it. I don't think they have a clue what's coming. So it would be a very, I guess my point is if there could be some consideration given, what could be done to minimize that effect? It's a young family with 2 kids that
Mhm.
this house about 4 years ago or something. But that house is super affected.
Yeah, that's good to
Really
know.
not, I urge you to walk through the area to see for yourself.
Which house again, Parker?
51.
51.
It's kind of set in the back of the houses. And the last thing is I had a long conversation with a gentleman, Chris Tracy, who was listed in MCO proposal He's been a longtime member of the zoning board in Harvard. He dealt with MCO, and they dealt with several projects like this. He said he'll be more than happy to come at his own time and talk with whoever wants to talk with him, because there's a lot of interesting gotchas that the towns are not aware of. For example, if this is a 40B project and a zoning board says no to something, they have a way to overrule the town.
Yes,
That's the law.
yeah.
So it's very important to think through all the things up front and and ask them to put in a proposal, modified proposal or something like that, whatever those issues may be. So that at least it's not a surprise that nobody talked about it.
What's the gentleman's name?
Chris Tracy, who happens to be father of my daughter. Just a coincidence.
He lives in Harvard?
Right. So he authorized that to tell you, more than.
So he lives in Harvard, but he's also the zoning, he's on the zoning board?
He's on the
is that-
zoning board.
Okay.
For all of the He's a developer, he did have
And he's got a vested interest.
He's a really nice guy. Thank you.
Any other questions?
No,
All right.
And he obviously has nice kids because he married into your family, right?
well, that's how you're looking at it.
I see Jake's hand up in the
No,
back.
I just want to say I appreciate all the hard work and effort that's gone into this. I know with the proposals and everything's come a long way from where we were a few years ago, and I know a lot went into that. And I think we got a great proposal here from a couple of good contractors. I'm glad to see you pick who you picked. You know, assuming there's no pitfalls here coming from any other conversations, but I know how much time and energy and effort goes into doing one of these things, and I appreciate the time and effort from this board. I think you guys have done a great job, and look forward to see how the project turns out.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Janey?
Yeah, I was on the housing committee for a while, so I had particular interest in done, and I tickled with what you chose. My understanding is that the plan also has room for community gardens and paths, nature paths, so both 28-acre project, and about 40% comes under the Rivers Act or the Wetlands Act or one thing or another. And this is only a 6-acre, I believe, building area. I'm a person who would like to go back to the 1950s and stay there, but I think this is a heck of a lot better than the alternative, which you did not choose. And we always felt that the two things that were driving us were the need for people who wanted to downsize but stay in town, and young folks who wanted to be able to get a start and eventually stay in town too, but at the time to build up and buy a home. If I could go back, even before the gravel was all out there, I would, but I think you've done fine.
Okay, thank you. And we didn't mention that the proposal does include, public parking and walking paths and a launch at the pond for canoes or kayaks or something. So it will be available to the rest of the community.
Any other questions? Joan, I didn't make it over to you yet.
No, you did a great job. I'm very happy with your choice, and can't wait to see how hopefully everything will go well, and it's very exciting.
Good, it is. Thank you.
I did have a couple folks reach out just sort of independently on, like Facebook Messenger was one from a neighbor that had stopped through to a couple meetings. And this was the second of similar messaging where they're supporting the MCO project in its scope. Obviously we have some details to work out with them, but overall, those that were able to attend a public meeting we had as a group a couple weeks ago seemed, to Pavel's point, I think they wish they had more information, but after hearing some of the discussion points we had, generally the support seemed to funnel towards the MCO project. So I think I'm hopeful that it works in the right direction, and myself, Leah, and Ron can connect with this group and go from there and try to get a good deal for the town. So
I've had a few emails come forward, sort of giving the same sentiments,
yeah,
going with MCO.
Also, a little tip from the Regional Housing Network group that I have been going to for 10 years every single month. Be sure you put into the ground lease the fact that you want at least 95% occupancy at all times. If they get allowed to go much lower, they can let the thing deteriorate.
yeah,
And that was one of my problems with Arch, is he had no plan on keeping the place beyond 10 years. His intention was to sell it.
yeah. I think things like that, like, I know it seems cheesy to think about snow because we haven't had much, but like, how quickly are you plowing the snow? Like, are you having your residents keep the cars clear? Like, I know other, landlords in the area are like, hey, 24 hours, you gotta have your car cleared, or have someone help senior citizens, whatever type of citizen it is there. So some of those finite details will be interesting to hear. I don't want to necessarily micromanage somebody who's a professional in this.
No, but you need to discuss it. They need to be discussion points.
Right.
Yeah.
No, very good. And I imagine the work he's already done in other towns would mimic what we would desire.
Yeah. But I think if there's any other like tidbits and nuggets like that, feel free to either send to the select board, copy Jason and Sue, just so we start to have a working checklist of things that we're not going to know everything. So I think you guys have worked really hard on this for a while. So
That's why that regional network is good. It's all over eastern Massachusetts, and it's housing coordinators from every town, depending on whether they're volunteers like myself, and there's a lot of towns like that, and there are several towns that have no CPC funds, and they're struggling, and so we just get together once a month and try to solve problems.
yeah, it's the only way to do it. So. Any other action we need to take, Jason? Do we need to take a vote here, or what's the?
So based on my reading of the RFP, I think your next step is you can either do it together, or you can do it separately and then come back to a meeting. I think you need to go through this and rank the proposals yourselves. Either, like I said, either individually, then come together and do it,
Okay.
or you can just do it all together at the meeting. I think that's the next step. And then from there, I think then you can, just based on the rankings, you can then decide if you want to invite both of them in for an interview, if you want to invite one of them in for an interview, and then make a selection, and then we'll start negotiations on the LDA, the lease, and everything else.
But we're not supposed to usurp the affordable housing group's recommendation, though. That would defeat the whole purpose of that group. Then,
No, the ultimate decision is the select board's.
even if they recommend one.
They make a recommendation to you, and then ultimately the select board.
Okay, all right.
I didn't write this, but my reading, if anyone wants to chime in and shed some light on it, I'm more than open to it. Based on my reading of it, the select board needs to go through the evaluation criteria and rank them.
Except that this is for us to use.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And then come back, have consensus as a board, tabulate it, and then make a decision on who you want, based on that ranking, who you want to invite in for an interview.
Okay.
And then from there, make a selection. It does pretty clearly say that an interview led by the board of the select board is a necessary part of the evaluation process. So that should happen, but you can decide if you want both or just one.
Okay.
And then, based on that, make a selection, and then the negotiations can begin.
Okay. So let's put that on the agenda for next week then, if that's okay with
Yeah.
you.
To review.
Yeah.
This is our homework.
Yeah, I'm pretty well versed in it, but I think sure you and Ron will be
I've read
quick
through
read.
them, I'll go through
Yeah,
again.
exactly.
That's fine.
And we'll, let's do our homework and then tabulate everything together for next Thursday. And the following meeting, ideally look to invite one or both groups to come in.
2 weeks from now.
Yeah, sit down and chat with us, because I don't want to,
So we're gonna have another meeting March 2nd.
unless people are away for school vacation week next week, is that an
Next
issue
week
for
is
you,
school
Jason?
I'm away. But I don't think I need to be here.
Yeah, I don't think it'd be a joint meeting necessarily. You're certainly welcome to
Yeah.
come and participate, but
No, it doesn't
Not
have to
next
be a
week.
joint meeting.
No, next week.
2 weeks from now,
You
2
guys
weeks
gotta
would
make
be-
your
when
decision.
you have
Second.
the,
we can meet the 23rd to get this ball rolling, right? Or is
Yeah,
that-
no, absolutely.
Yeah,
No,
okay.
Sooner the better.
Unless that's a problem for you, or you, not a problem, or yes?
No,
a
I can
problem?
do that.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yep,
um,
that works.
I'd say just, I don't want to leave either group hanging, because I know as things get warm, they get to start planning projects, and
Roll.
let's do our homework. Thank you, Alan, and let's get it going.
so you're thinking of inviting one or both contenders on Thursday, March 2nd?
Yeah.
Okay, and I'll attend as an audience member. There's no need for affordable housing to have a meeting, correct?
I don't think so, but we have some time to figure that out.
Okay.
I mean, from this proposal,
You've done your work.
We're
right?
done.
Yeah, we've
Yeah.
done it.
Yeah,
We've
that's my
recommended.
feeling on it.
This
Yeah.
is what we want.
Yeah.
So we can just smile and throw things from the audience.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Throw
we can
haymakers.
stand there with the hammers.
Yeah, because from now on, we're members of the public, so.
That's right. Relieved.
Now we gotta start planning the next project.
Speaking of which, Habitat for Humanity is still looking for space. So if anybody has any bright ideas where we have at least one building lot somewhere, they're still looking for space.
Mill Street, right? They selling one on Mill Street right now?
It's sold.
Oh, it did sell?
River Street, they've got a new subdivision coming forward.
That's where the affordable housing unit's going, so
That's where the one is. That's going in.
they're all like $1 million each, those houses.
Yeah.
Tough to
No,
buy.
they will build their own, they'll put in their
Yeah.
own water, they'll do whatever, but they want the space. They want
Yeah.
it donated, obviously. They don't wanna buy it from us.
Right.
Would they build a house for the town administrator?
Good point.
Boy, they're really
You guys are the best. You guys are the best.
Just a different update.
Well, Sue's, she might be seeing herself in that job.
I'm seeing
in
herself.
10 years, so she's really, that's what she's really
Yeah.
targeting right now,
I'm all right. Good point. A couple of parsonages in town.
What about the, I guess this is semi-serious, what about the houses that seem to have been abandoned in town that aren't lived in? Are they are taxes owed on them? Are taxes still being paid? Like the one, oh my gosh, and the dead end that goes to the, at the sharp corner of Pleasant Street, if you go down that.
Woods Court?
Yeah, Woods Court, third house up on the left. You can't even see the house. It's completely overgrown. No one's lived there for
Really? No
a
one
couple
lives there?
decades. Oh, you can't even see the
West,
driveway.
West House?
I would,
On the end of, on Woods Court?
Yeah,
West House used to be there.
it's like the third house up on the left.
Harold, right? Harold used to be there, but
That's
he's
where
sold his
Harold
house.
and Eddie
And-
grew up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's a 20-year-old house, so it's a nice
Oh.
2,000 square foot house.
Look at the assessor's records.
And it's off of Pleasant Street?
Yeah, that
Woods
really
Court.
sharp corner where the
Heading towards
person-
Pepperell.
Yeah, heading
Mhm.
towards
Right on the
We
Pepperell.
take a
corner.
left onto
Okay.
Road goes
West,
in.
Woods Court.
Yeah,
Right
and
right
it's,
beside the leaders.
The new house, are you talking about
It-
the new house?
It's not new.
well, it's 20 years old.
More than that.
Is that Harold and,
Yeah, they moved, but I
They
believe
moved to
they
Florida.
sold it. I don't know if the people live there
It's-
full time or not.
No one lives there. You can't even, the driveway has trees in it. They just came up through the pavement.
No kidding.
It's completely overgrown.
So I mean, has anyone looked inside the house? I mean,
You can't see it.
no, but if someone bought it, did someone pass away inside the house right now?
I don't know. But I
Because
mean,
that
We have another
it
one of
happens.
those, but the police do well-being checks
Okay.
every so often.
but
They do. I mean, there was one on Groton Street just before you get to Unkety Brook there. There's a house that has a farmer's porch.
Yeah,
We
but-
always see boxes of Amazon.
yes, and the
The
cars
yellow-
at the head of the
yellow
driveway.
house there?
Yeah, Eric's told me they go in once a year for well-being checks. And it's just,
Yeah.
Does
It's just
someone
the
live
way-
there?
Yeah,
Really?
yeah.
I've driven by before it and I'm like,
Which house is this?
I couldn't even tell you
It-
the
it
address.
has-
It's right before Uncudy Brook.
I know.
Heading toward the high school, it's maybe halfway toward the high school on the right. And it's got a dead car at the, next to the mailbox. Car
Oh, somebody lives there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Is it like an elderly person?
It's just, someone's living there.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
I thought it was abandoned.
No, I mean, there's one that the lot backs up to us on Hall Street. Never seen lights on or anything like that.
Oh.
Nothing. But hey, that's the way everyone lives a little differently, or if they're not around. But, you know, sometimes there are tax situations on other homes. Like there was one that the Blue Ranch on 113 that finally got sold. They actually had water just fill up the house down there too. So that, they owed like $10,000 in water bills because the water was just running in the basement.
Oh,
Oh, my
That,
God.
is it the house right next to the water tower, like kind of a few over?
It's old, there's the one that,
The new one.
there's the new one and then the blue one.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
water had just run.
And the blue one was just remodeled.
Yeah,
Yeah.
within the last
Sold.
18 months
Yeah.
or so.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
No one's living in it?
No,
No, they are now,
But
but previously,
it-
because that was a double house lot right there, so. I mean, it'd be cool to have a Habitat for Humanity project, but someone's gotta, like Cars for Kids, you gotta donate that land, basically.
I was just wondering if people weren't paying taxes, if the city or the town could.
We can, yeah. I mean, we do have a list of properties that are delinquent in their taxes, and there is a tax title process that you have to follow. It's not,
It's not pretty.
I don't think we've initiated any at this moment, and it is like, I think, a 5-year process. But you can, and ultimately you can take the property and auction it off, or,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Takes a while to get to that.
yeah.
Yeah. Pepperell has one that's taken them like 3 years to get to it, and they still don't own it, and they're trying to get conservation to buy it, so.
Just, it might be a win-win if there are houses that would be fine for that.
Oh, there's no question. I mean, in my prior community, we actually auctioned off 3 properties through the tax title process, and it was a huge neighborhood improvement because they were just abandoned properties, no one taking care of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all I have to report.
I've got nothing.
Does Affordable Housing want to adjourn their meeting?
Yes, but before we do that, Jeff and Chris are wrapping up their process so that we should be able to plan for a public meeting for the housing production plan.
Okay.
Which is first weekish of March or so.
Cool.
So I'll keep you all informed. And then after the public meeting, they'll do some more final details and present it to the board for approval.
Awesome.
let's hope they fixed all those.
Yes, eliminated.
He was pretty embarrassed though.
Yeah.
Well, I'll give him that much.
So for the housing
Did you see the
committee,
list I sent him?
for the housing committee, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Meeting, all in favor? Meeting adjourned.
Who we adjourn?
All those in favor?
You just gotta second it.
Second.
Yeah.
Aye.
Aye. All righty then.
Thank you, crowd members. Thank you, audience, for listening.